Take Back Your Health Now, Episode 62.
You're listening to the Take Back Your Health Now podcast, the show that interviews the top doctors, athletes, trainers, and entrepreneurs to help you find the holy grail of health. Now here's your host, Dr. Dan Margolin.
This is Dr. Dan Margolin with another segment of Take Back Your Health Now, where we pull out all the stops in search of health's holy grail. I'm very excited to have Dr. Sylvia Tara. She holds a Ph.D. in biochemistry from the University of California, San Diego, and an MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. She was a healthcare management consultant with McKinsey Company and has worked for the world's largest biotechnology companies. After an extended battle with fat, Dr. Tara became fascinated with its resiliency and embarked on a mission. This book is the culmination of years of research and interviews with physicians, patients, and leading scientists. The secret life of fat will forever change how you think about this misunderstood organ. Dr. Tara, how are you?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show. So I am so fascinated by your book and by what you've written about. The first thing that stands out, your book is called The Secret Life of Fat, the Science Behind the Body's Least and what it means for you. So I want to go back to the origin of how you got involved in this, but I also want to ask you, I've never thought of fat as an organ. So has it always been thought of as an organ? Is that new to your book and your concept, or, what is the deal with that?
Yeah, so it's not always been thought of as an organ. In fact, fat is mostly thought of as just useless blubber, something we have to get rid of. And actually, fat is critical to our bodies. And that's the surprising outcome that actually got me to write a book. And the way I got into this is that I myself have always had struggles with fat. I gain weight very easily and always have. I've watched people eat whatever they want and not gain a pound. I've watched people go on a diet for a week and lose, 5 pounds. I can't do those things. And it got to the point that I really had to understand why. Why do people respond differently to diets? Why is my fat different? Why are things not working for me? And I'm a scientist, so I felt, if anyone can understand fat, I'm going to investigate fat. And so I spent 5 years really digging through the scientific literature. I read over 1,000 articles about fat and what it is. And I talked to over 50 thought leaders, researchers, scientists around the world about what they were finding out about fat. And what I found out was so astounding. I thought I have to capture it into a book and share this with people. And one of the most interesting things is that fat isn't not just tissue. So it's like skin, if you think of it. So, a piece of skin is just a piece of skin tissue, but skin in its totality functions like an organ, and fat is the same way. It's an endocrine organ, which means it functions like your thyroid or your adrenal or glands. It emits hormones that our bodies depend on. And, two of those one is leptin that has critical function around our body. Another one is adiponectin that actually keeps us healthy. So healthy fat and a healthy amount of fat actually keep us healthy because it is an organ.
And now, is fat just at what point that differentiates it from being unhealthy, healthy? How would you differentiate the two?
Yeah, so normal amounts of fat, so in your normal kind of weight category, even 10 pounds above that, is actually quite okay. Fat becomes unhealthy when we get excess amounts of it. And it depends on where your fat is. Well, another thing I learned is that not all fat is created equal. So we have subcutaneous fat. That's the fat that's right underneath our skin and our buttocks, our thighs. And that's actually a safer deposit of fat. If you're going to have extra fat, that's the place to put it. Fat becomes dangerous when you get visceral fat, and that's the fat underneath the stomach wall, nestled against our internal organs. It's that fat that tends to become really inflamed, and when it becomes inflamed, it interferes with insulin signaling, and it starts to cause problems like diabetes type 2 and heart disease. Visceral fat's really dangerous. And there's other kinds of fat, too. There's something called brown fat, and brown fat's around our heart region, it's around our spine, and that fat, instead of for storing calories, it actually burns calories to produce heat in our bodies. So we actually love brown fat. It helps us burn up calories. And there's all different fats. We have fat in our brain that's critical, it's vital, and so there's different types of fat everywhere. And there are cases of people who are fat but fit. So I just want to throw that out there, that even though, we really dislike fat, we think we have to get rid of it. The dangerous kinds give the whole story of sumo wrestlers who, despite being extremely fat, manage to stay healthy because they don't have a lot of visceral fat. And that's a whole interesting story unto itself.
That is fascinating. I remember years ago I ran a half marathon, and I was in okay shape, but there were some people that just passed me by in a second, and they didn't. If you looked at them on the street, you would not think they were in shape. They were fairly heavy. So I understand. Do. When you first started your journey, you started reading this, tell me how your viewpoint changed. Obviously thousands of articles and thousands of things that you read, papers that you read. Was there a point where you went, wow, this is way different than I thought? Or did you just go into this with a pretty much of an open mind and say, hey, I'm expecting to sort of be taken on a long journey here?
No, I went in looking for ways to lose weight. That I gained weight easily, and I was really tired of it. I was tired of being led down these paths of just follow this simple diet and you lose weight. Follow my diet and you lose weight. And it felt like everyone's just selling something. And I thought, why am I following all these people? I have the ability to understand this myself. So I went in with ways of, why do we gain weight? Why do some people gain it easier than others? That was my initial question in all of this. And the more I came out, I think that the time I really got surprised was when I was learning about the importance of fat and how it's critical, and how people who have insufficient fat, like people with anorexia, or people who have defective fat, believe it or not, you can have such a thing, genetic defects, and it's not producing the hormones that it's supposed to, and all the problems that cause. It totally changed my thinking on fat. And so we have to think of fat not just as excess blubber, but it's actually important. It's as important as your lungs or your colon or your heart. So just like all those organs have a campaign built around it, a whole advertising campaign about keeping them healthy, your fat actually needs the same attention. And, because your fat is really clever, and it's really, it's intricate, it's functioning in multiple ways. Also, for losing fat, you have to really understand it if you want to lose it. That important. And because it's an organ, nature wants to protect it. Your body wants to protect it. It doesn't really want you to lose it. So once you've gained excess weight, excess fat, your body has all kinds of ways to protect it and keep it on, and have you try to get it back on once you lose it.
Give us some ways that your body would do that. I know one thing in your book you talk about stem cells to actually regenerate. Tell us a little bit about that and some other ways.
Yeah, so the main way that your body fights to keep fat back on is, and so fat releases a hormone called leptin. And when it's released from fat cells, it goes into the bloodstream and it goes to our brain, into the hypothalamus region, and it affects appetite. So when we're normal, we have normal levels of fat, we're overall pretty satiated. We get hungry around mealtime, but nothing out of the ordinary. But when you lose fat, you lose leptin, because fat produces leptin, less fat, less leptin. And when your leptin level goes down, you get this enormous drive to eat. It affects your brain, and there's not as much leptin around it, and it wants it back. It wants to put it back. And so you go into overdrive with food, with hunger and a drive to eat. In fact, I write about one girl, Layla, in my book. She had defective fat. Her fat wasn't producing leptin, and no one knew about leptin at the time. This was some decades ago, and she was so driven to eat. She was approaching 300 pounds, as a child.
Wow.
And her parents were blamed. She was blamed. Everyone, got blamed, because you're supposed to be able to just control yourself. And finally, after some years, when leptin was discovered in mice, in Britain, that's where she was living, decided to test her to see if she had the same problem as these mice did, these mice that had defective genes. It turned out she did. Her fat wasn't producing leptin. She had this rare genetic defect. And once they found this out, they could give her injections of leptin, and amazingly, her appetite went down. She turned normal. She's living a very normal life right now.
Wow.
And so, we're not always in control. I think people think of fat, well, you just have to control yourself and that's it. But there's all kinds of reasons we get fat. One is behavioral, and that's what leptin does. It affects behavior. The whole other section of the book, the middle section, which is all kinds of different ways we get fat that are not just about sloth and gluttony.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, so bacteria and viruses have a role in fat creation, depending on what kind of bacterial distribution in your gut you have. You could be extracting more or less calories out of your food. viruses even. I write a whole section on a virus called 8036, which is correlated with twice the risk of obesity. People who have had this virus, they tend to produce more fat molecules from glucose. They produce more fat cells, differentially create fat cells. It's really interesting. And they can still be, thin. They can be in shape, but they have to work harder at it. They have to eat less than what's considered a normal diet, to stay thin. And I write about a man named Randy who struggled with this for his whole life until he finally figured out he had this virus and then could learn what to do. But genetics too. I write about genetics. There's populations of people who are predisposed to gain fat. And I write about the Pima Indians that have been talked about for some time. On a Western diet, they gain by far more fat than Caucasians on that same diet.
So they're eating the same foods, but they're extracting more of the fat, more into fat. And are they converting more into fat than they would muscle, let's say? Is there a correlation between the two?
It seems more. They're getting obese. So yes, I'd have to say they're converting more to fat. And they have this genotype, the thrifty genotype. So through decades of these Indians came down through the Bering Straits, and on the West Coast there were periods of drought and famine, and their bodies are thought to have tuned itself to this kind of thrifty genotype. It's really tuned to hoarding food and saving it for these times of famine. And so because their lineage came through this type of path, when they go on a normal diet, they actually get quite fatter than other people on the same diet. And so you have to understand all these things about yourself. If you're gaining weight, if you gain easily like I do, and you're failing on different diets, then I think it's time to really get smart about your fat, understand it at a scientific level. What is it doing in your body? What are ways we're gaining it? If you feel like you're eating normally, but you're still heavier than you think you should be, it's just knowledge is power. And so when you educate yourself about fat, you can start fighting it back with the tools that it's using to stay on you, which is kind of what I did. I lost 30 pounds in the end. It off. And I won't say it's not work. It is. But I now understand why I have to eat less than most people, and why I have to exercise more. And so I did achieve what I set out to achieve, which is to understand fat at a much deeper level and figure out finally what to do without having to follow everyone else's diet plan.
First of all, very, very well done. I mean, I interviewed Dr. Stephen Gundry. He wrote the book, I think, The Diet Evolution, and he talked a little bit about this in terms of your gut bacteria. And he said that his premise was also that if you start eating sugars, let's say, he differentiated good bacteria and bad bacteria. So if you eat vegetables, the good bacteria start to get larger and larger and larger. If you start eating sugars, then the bad bacteria come over, and they actually communicate to you through different hormones as well. And he was relating it to that. Have you found that to be true as well?
Yeah, that's a simplified version or simplified terms of using it, but absolutely. People who eat more fruits and vegetables, they're getting fewer calories, but they're also tilting their microbiome towards one that is associated with a leaner body type. They get more of the Bacteroidetes type of aminophila and less of the other kind of Firmicutes that extract more calories. And so you are tilting your microbiome. People that eat more processed food, more sugars, more fats, they have a different distribution. And that distribution actually extracts more calories out of food. So not only, in a way, fat loss begets fat loss. So if you're eating a lot of salad, a lot fewer calories, but you're also extracting fewer calories out of the food you're eating and passing more as waste. Versus, if you're eating a lot of fats and sugars, not only are you getting more energy dense foods, but you're also extracting more out of it. So fat begets fat, and fat loss begets fat loss. It's like a spiral.
It's like a spiral. And I've done this. I've actually spent some time getting away from all sugars and, just trying to eat vegetables and some fruit and meat and those kind of things. And then I find that about 7 weeks into it, I get this crazy urge to have cake. It's like,
yes.
What is that? What is that?
I actually have a body hack I use, and I know not everyone agrees with me, but, we both know there are volumes of books now against sugar and how terrible and toxic and awful sugar is. But I'll tell you, I got a sweet tooth. And so one of my teachings in my book, at least, is that, a diet has to work for you. That effect I talked about with leptin, where leptin drives you to eat more, it also reduces your metabolism. So just before I go forward, is that when we lose fat, we lose leptin, our appetite is driven to be even bigger, and our metabolism goes down. Leptin binds to muscles, and so when we have less of it, our muscles get more efficient, and we pack on weight. So you want to eat more, and your metabolism's lower. That effect I talked about, it can last for 6 years or longer, right? It doesn't go away just after you're done dieting. It doesn't even go away if you put some weight back on. Like that effect lasts for years. So you have to find a diet that will work with you for years. And so if you really like sugar, you really have a need for sugar, some diet calling for actually pretty hard to stay on. And some of these really strict diets, they work when you're on them. And the second you come off, you go right back and you start regaining weight.
Is that like almost like a yo-yo kind of a situation?
It's a yo-yo. It's because it's not tenable for everybody. A diet has to work for you, for your lifestyle, or, for your psychology, as far as what do you need to have in your life? What kind of foods can you not live without? And it has to work for you biologically. Your body has to respond to it. And so, actually, getting back to my example, I actually really like sugar. And so I find like something like the Atkins diet where it's no sugar at all. I don't stay on them, because I have this craving. But the body hack I have finally figured out is that small amounts of sugar actually are very satiating. And it turns out that, when we have insulin, it has a lot of satiating quality to it. And so what I've learned to do is just have like something like 4 or 5 M&Ms when I really have the craving. And I'm satiated for hours after that. And it's
like
part of that insulin release. And so, try it. It might help you. And
I like it.
the other thing to know is that not everyone responds to There's research now, Weizmann Institute did some really good research showing blood sugar response of people. So they had a number of people eat all kinds of things, alcohol, muffins, cake, cookies, and they found not everyone has a blood sugar spike after eating, say, a cookie. Some people don't respond much at all. Other people have a huge spike after that. And you might be one of these people that can get away with carbs and not gain a lot of weight. And even if you're not one of those people, like I found there's certain things I can eat that are sweet that don't pack on weight. So I keep a very diligent log of what I eat all the time, and I can correlate it to weight. And I've noticed small amounts of chocolate, little is fine. If I have a cookie with a lot of flour in it, I will gain weight. So figure out for yourself what you can get away with.
It's funny. I used to love to have eggs with toast in the morning, and it was the same thing. I noticed that when I would have that, I would gain weight. And I assume it was the toast, but I cut it out for the most part, and it really stabilized. But if I would do that, absolutely, my weight would go through the roof.
Did you try whole wheat? I noticed that with whole wheat toast, I don't gain weight. But with white toast, I absolutely gain weight.
You're right. It was the white toast. Absolutely.
Yeah. Try whole wheat and you might get away with it.
I've sort of given that up. So it's trying to actually figure out their body type, the correct diet, and do that sort of body hack. How would they start doing that? Like, would they keep a log? How would you recommend doing that?
Yeah, first of all, I think reading this book would help, as a foundation, just to understand what fat is, why it's important in our bodies. It's tools for fighting back. So it has leptin. That's one tool to fight back. It diverts blood supply to itself. It controls appetite. So as you lose weight, you'll start to get hungry. Also really understand all the different ways you get fat, because where you might be eating a perfectly good diet and yet being heavy, and it's not all about food. So understand it first. Secondly, although I talk about a myriad of different things that cause fat and how we're all very individual, cutting across all body types, there are things that tend to work. So you can start with the foundation. Number one is, yes, reduce your carbs and sugar, because insulin, lots of books written about this, it does help pack on pounds. You might be able to find ways to sneak it in later, but in the beginning, cut those out just to give yourself a foundation. Start eating more salads. We talked about the microbiome. Salads, they pass more as waste. They help tilt your microbiome to something more beneficial, one more, associated with leanness. That's really helpful. Another thing I talk about is about eating time. And so, we've learned about insulin. It turns out there's a number of other hormones that really help us lose weight as well, or affect our weight as well. And growth hormone is one of those, as well as testosterone. As we age, we lose our growth hormone as we get older. And so that's why we pack on pounds. Chapter on that as well. In the night, growth hormone, the release of growth hormone peaks in the middle of the night. And when you eat, you actually mitigate the effects of growth hormone. So fasting, prolonging the overnight fast, actually helps keep growth hormone more active, in our blood and continue to release. And actually ghrelin, which is a hormone released from the stomach, promotes the release of growth hormone. So if you can extend that overnight fast a bit, so say don't eat past 6 o'clock and don't eat again until 9, it's actually a great fat busting mechanism. And not only does that increase weight loss. It also helps curb appetite. And so there's studies on this too, that eating during a certain interval of the day, like say over an 8-hour period, instead of a 16-hour period, it actually curbs appetite and it helps lose weight. So that's another really good trick to use. So those are things I cut across.
So let me make sure I get this. So you're saying, like, if you go through a fasting, it actually releases more growth hormone, better for you in terms of your fat and your diet. So what would be the appropriate fasting? I know I did a liver cleanse where I fasted for like 2 days and then I would eat and then I would fast for a couple of days. Is there sort of a set thing where if you fast for a couple of days and then you eat for a couple of days, and is there anything like that?
There are. There's all kinds of intermittent fasting. One is where you fast for a whole day or day and a half at a time. I find those hard to go through. They are not suited for me anyway. The one that I like better is actually daily intermittent. Like I said, you have an early dinner, eat at 5, don't eat after 6 o'clock or so, and then don't eat again until the next morning. And it's not that hard to get through. You get a little bit hungry maybe at night, but your body gets used to it, around 9 o'clock or so at night. But you'll eat again 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock the next morning and you'll be fine. And that actually really helps. And it's a little bit of sacrifice, but it's not, the end. And, in my book, I have a chapter on myself and what I did. I actually stopped eating at around 3 or 4 o'clock. So I increased that fast a little bit more. But again, I have extraordinarily stubborn fat, and that's not. So it works really well. And it's actually catching on quite a bit now, intermittent fasting.
Wow, what a great idea. What about exercise? How does exercise fit into this?
Yeah, so exercise too. It also helps with your hormones. Exercise promotes the release of growth hormone as well, and testosterone. Testosterone is a phenomenal fat burner, both in men and women. Exercise is tricky. Exercise also releases ghrelin, right, the hunger hormone. And so, you can have a big hunger spike in response to it. So you have to add exercise in slowly. And I do have chapter on women versus men, how women gain weight differently than men, and why we fight so much with it. And it turns out that women have a stronger response to exercise than men. We actually release more ghrelin after exercise than men do, so we have a stronger hunger spike. And interestingly, it lasts for a long time. Even after we eat, we tend to overeat after exercising compared to men, and even after we eat, it's still 25% higher. So I think the ghrelin's 25% higher, meaning that we're still hungry. So, I think women in particular add exercise and start with walking or hiking. And once you have your diet down, bulletproof, you got your diet regimen down and you can deal with it mentally, that's a time to enter more exercise in. Ratchet it up slowly. If you start getting a hunger spike, just bring it down a bit until it's something you can tolerate.
It's just to add to what you're saying, I've been working out pretty steadily now for about a year, just lifting. But now the last few weeks, I've hired a trainer and I'm really going at it and I am starving, so I didn't know what that was related to, but I could absolutely. And so I've never heard this before. Let me ask you, when you came out with the book and when you spoke to your colleagues, what type of reaction did you get from them?
Yeah, mostly positive. I mean, mostly they were thankful a book finally got written like this, which is explaining the inside workings of fat and why we all have issues with it. It was particularly helpful for people like me who have really stubborn fat. Another reaction I got is this isn't exactly a diet book. I don't have meal plans in there. I don't tell people exactly what to do on a day-to-day basis. And I think some people wanted that. They just want a regular old diet book. And so, it's different. I have to out there. This is more of like a science book about fat to understand your fat. And at the end, there are tips, there are things you can do, but it's not a day-to-day meal plan solution like some of the other books out there. So, but mostly it was just really positive, very enlightening. Scientists and doctors, I think, liked it a lot. I got a lot of referrals from doctors in certain cities. Personal trainers liked it a lot too. So people in the know who wanted that extra knowledge about fat actually really appreciated the book.
Let me ask you, when you use your book as a sort of a bellwether and you start to compare different diets against it, do you find that there are some diets that are very closely your concepts and maybe others that are not so much?
Yeah, I mean, most diets are one-dimensional. They'll take one point and they'll harp on it for 200 pages. They'll harp on this one thing, like no sugar, sugar is bad, right? We've heard that a number of times, or only eat meat. And there's even a bread diet, only eat bread, or there's even like fruit moves. Everyone goes, it's one-dimensional, most of these books. What's different about The Secret Life of Fat is that it's multi-dimensional. It's on all dimensions of fat. And so, if you find a diet's not working for you, don't like it, you can kind of craft your own. And this is what this book helps you do. If you haven't understood foods and how individual we are, which is what I'm really describing in the book, that everyone's really different based on our genetics, our microbiome, our age, our hormone levels, our gender. Like, it's really different. Even your history of yo-yo dieting will affect how quickly you can lose weight. And so, just depending on these things, not all diets are suited.
Well, how does a history of yo-yo dieting, how does that affect it?
Like I mentioned, after we've lost some weight, our metabolism is lower. It's 10% lower during rest, 25% lower during exercise. We are burning less calories. So say someone that was 150 pounds naturally, right? They never had to lose weight to get there. And you compare them to someone who was 170 pounds and lost 20 pounds to get to 150 pounds. The person who's lost 20 pounds has to eat 22% fewer calories, or about 250 to 450 fewer calories than the person who's never lost weight to begin with, if they were overweight. And that's because of the caloric penalty you get once you've lost some fat. Losing fat makes us have less leptin. Leptin binds with muscle. And when there's less leptin around, our muscles become more efficient. They burn fewer calories. And we're kind of permanently changed after that. So if you've done this a lot, this up and down, you've wreaked some havoc on your body. It's had different leptin levels. It wants to hoard calories. It does not want to have to lose weight again.
Wow. It's almost going into like a preservation.
It is. And to fight it back, you just have to be really persistent. It's going to take you longer. Your body's going to want to hold on to that fat for a long time. It's not sure if this is another yo-yo thing you're doing. What are you doing? So it's going to try to stabilize. And, you can count on a good 4 to 6 months before you really start to see weight move. So, another lesson from the book is just be really patient, be persistent. Number one, you don't have to look like a bikini model or someone on the cover of Sports Illustrated to be healthy. Fat is important. Even if you have a little bit more than you want, it's not the end of the world as long as you have good fat distribution. Secondly, losing it, especially if you've had a history of dieting or just difficult fat, just be patient. It will take a long time. Find a diet that works for you for the long haul. You'll be on this forever, right? Because, like I said, the effects of losing fat can last for 6 years or more. And then, just kind of forgive yourself. I have a whole chapter 2 on the psychology of dieting. And there's all kinds of ways we react to dieting. And it's actually very interesting. There's something called dichotomous thinking, where when people come off their diet, they punish themselves. They feel like they failed. They might as well come off. And it's actually very debilitating. And, you have to kind of forgive yourself. You have to give yourself breaks. We build up self-control in steps. It's like a muscle, and you have to build it up with time. So, mind over fat is one of the biggest tools we have in that battle against our fat and managing it.
Dr. Tara, when we're looking back at certain things in our childhood or raising children that we should do to keep them healthy, to keep them with a fat level, have you noticed that there's certain things like antibiotics in children, like children that have been on a long course of, or even a short course of antibiotics? Are they more prone to obesity? I've heard that. Or are there, just as raising children, what should we be?
I think, raising children, as far as fatness and antibiotics, it's certainly been used in livestock quite a bit, that application of antibiotics to help get weight gain on livestock. So there's definitely something there. But, as far as raising our children, it really gets down to no matter what your issue is, I think you can manage your fat. It's harder for some people than others. So, if you have a kid and they're gaining weight, really watch what you eat. These things that seem really innocuous and benevolent, look at your calories. Look at the sugar content, look at the processed food content. One thing I think people have to do if they want to maintain low weight is you have to start cooking. You have to know exactly what's in your food. There's all kinds of hidden sugars and fillers and preservatives, things that make food have long shelf life or make it tasty or make it cheap. And if you want to really control your health, you start cooking, start getting whole foods, not from Whole Foods Market, but wholesome foods. So start getting fresh meat, vegetables. Things that you can make, and you know exactly what's going in. You're not adding any more sugar or flavors or anything like that. And I find that helps a lot. I cook more than I think I ever did. And, it's funny, I've gotten a very sensitive taste palate now. So when there's something in the food, like there's extra sugar, I can taste it right away. I know it's not all real. I know there's filler in it. And I think that's what we have to tell kids is like, stop it with the chips. Stop, even school lunches, I think are a little bit suspect, and start really packing healthy foods, and then, exercise. Kids, I think they run around as much have iPhones and TV, I'm not always convinced that it's lack of activity. I think it's just more the different foods that we're eating now compared to before and how processed they are.
Dr. Tara, one of the questions I always ask the guests towards the end of the show is what they consider to be the holy grail of health. So I'll pose that question to you. If I were to say, what do you consider to be the holy grail of health?
Yeah, and that's such a good question, a very open question. Health and happiness are intertwined, really. And so, I think when we're doing good for ourselves, we feel better. And so like the holy grail of health, is really knowing that you're doing your best to take care of yourself. If you have a problem, you feel strengthened and empowered to take it on. You feel like you know where to get the know-how to take it on, and you're really applying yourself as much as you possibly can. And it's not about getting perfection. And I think this is a real problem with the diet industry and media in general keeps feeding us images of the perfect body. All these ways, these people we consider beautiful, and you're supposed to look like this, and you can if you just follow these 3 steps. And if you don't look like this, you've got the problem. It's not us. And at what celebrities actually do to look like that. And it's not healthy, to be honest. I mean, some of these models are dipping cotton balls in orange juice to fill themselves up, without any calories. And some of the, celebrities, like, they're fasting, long fast. They'll have water all day for days. And they're taking, like supplements and diet pills. And it's not great. It is not easy and not necessarily even healthy to be as thin as they are. And so don't forget it. Just leave that out. Throw that out the window. Find a body image. Be forgiving of yourself. Find a body that is healthy. It doesn't have to look like what the media puts out there. And know that you are applying yourself. You're educating yourself and applying all of that knowledge to yourself. And then glean happiness out of that. And that to me is the holy grail of good health and wellness.
Dr. Sylvia Tara, great advice. How would people that want to know more about you get in touch with you, read your book? How would they do so?
Yeah, sure. The book, The Secret Life of Fat, is on Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble. I think it's at most major bookstores. It's at some airports as well. And then you can always go to the website, www.thesecretlifeoffat.com. And you can follow me on Facebook, Sylvia Tara, Ph.D., and then on Twitter at Sylvia Tara, Ph.D. So I'm out there.
Dr. Sylvia Tara, thanks so much for being on the show. It was really awesome.
Great. Thanks for having me. Had a great time talking to you.
This episode is sponsored by New Jersey Foot and Ankle Center in Oradell, New Jersey. Remember, when you have a foot problem, you've got a foot doctor in the family. Weekend and evening appointments are available. Call us at 201-261-9445. Once again, that's 201-261-9445. Thanks for listening. Check out the show notes over at drdanspeaks.com. If you're loving the show, head over to iTunes and leave us a review, and we'll catch you next time.